Season 3, Episode 33, Decoded Podcast. I'm Roland Chidiak. He's Chris Clough. I'm starting to think, that is our new normal going to be podcast episodes that are
4 hours long, really.
curbside pickup, like the part that we air because we have our conversation. It's almost like it's become we're buddies and this is our time to chat. Every Saturday morning we get together, we have our beverage and we talk about the week and we talk about our lives as friends do. And then at some point we're like, hey, should we hit record now and talk and have a podcast? And I feel like I'm feeling actually at ease with this idea, because I think maybe years ago, months ago, I would have cut off our conversation to say, hey, let's drop an episode now. And I feel like now it's shifted to where I don't want to cut off our conversation. Our conversation came to a natural lull and you said, hey, should we drop a podcast? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. But it feels like it's going to be a curbside pickup because it's around 10:30 a.m. Saturday morning and you and I connected at 8:30 a.m. So we've had our coffee at the coffee shop and used up the Wi-Fi. And now it's time to get up and give the seats to somebody else.
So we're going to go for a walk and keep talking.
For sure.
We're going to use our own data to kind of like gather the rest of it. It's a couple things. I am working on, I think there's something in me that's craving to speak as plainly on tape right now with you as we did in the on-ramp, our protected space where we kind of we catch up. We cover, so much ground. Our talking about system leadership to decisions about, using marketing on your podcast and what does it mean? Like, what's the trade-off, and whether or not you could ever stand behind a product fully, and is that a distraction as soon as you bring advertisement into your podcast? Our paths to podcasting, like what is it at our core that are sort of like the core values in I think podcasting sits beside what our core values are. And I'll speak for myself, podcasting sits beside my core values of interest in pursuing professional learning. Like it's still the kind of like that compass needle pointing me towards conversations that are not happening right in front of me. So I'll pay attention to what's happening right in my context. I'll work on that. That's my job day to day. That's me being a dad. But I think my interest in sort of doing this digital type learning that you and I do every week is to sort of just see it from outside my silo. And of course, the on-ramp, like this week, you and I really, really anchored to first, I think the first drop in were the events in the Ramble in New York City with Mr. Cooper. And then we had our book club, the book club about the book that we're reading, the Nico Boys. And then you have the events in Minneapolis. And the on-ramp was full. It was just so full. And I think at some point, I'm going to forget. I think at some point, I'm going to forget or shift from, these are things that are only a part of the on-ramp. And, you find yourself in some measure speaking about it in broader circles. So it's not just in the protected space. And I think that's part of the finding a way to put yourself into these social issues and put yourself into these events that happen around us in a way that you feel like you can effectively speak to or support or intervene. I think part of the on-ramp is my way of kind of figuring out my thinking about what I should and could do, what I should and could have done But I don't know if I'm in the space yet where I'm ready to sort of come out from behind my thinking and stand in front of somebody who's actually at the center of any of these issues, being victimized by these issues, kind of finding the bravery to come out from behind the microphone and actively do something. I do in some small parts, but if I measure my efforts against change, I have no clue. It's not that I don't have any clue. My our on-ramp often brings to light my blind spots and how I need to sort of, needs the wrong word, basically accept that I have blind spots and then make a decision about what I'm going to do with those blind spots. And if I make a decision about not doing something that I readily identify as being a blind spot, I have to own that outcome too. So just to bring it down from abstract, this past week has been a big exercise in sort of reminding me that there are spaces in my day-to-day where I can be more active to be on the offense, to keep other people from experiencing the things that they experienced this past week for no other reason than they were a person of color. So there's the lead to our podcast for this morning.
It has been a heavy week.
Yeah.
It has been, like you said, the book club and the book we read called The Nickel Boys.
Colson Whitehead. We should mention
Colson Whitehead first. Yeah, great book. And that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to give anything away. But Colson Whitehead and the way things, went down in Minneapolis, and now like stuff's just going wacko down there in the States. So there's a lot going on, and it all kind of intersects, as you and I were talking about. There's connections everywhere with this stuff, and it's really, I feel kind of blessed that our book club and the topic of the book that we're reading about connects so well with the unfortunate incidents happening in the United States, and the conversations we've had in the book club based on our perspective. So if I could just throw something out, we were talking about The Nickel Boys is a book based around Black kids, white kids, and basically, I don't even know how to say it, Chris, like the way Black people have been treated in the United States for a long time, and the bad things that have happened to Black people in particular. That's what this book was about. The racial tensions and undertones and all that stuff. So it was kind of heavy that way. But Colson did a great job of writing the book in a way that didn't hit you over the head in like a gruesome way, more of like he puts out a lot of things that keeps you thinking. And one of the things that came up was this whole idea of when you look a certain way, and people who look a certain way have been treated a certain way for so long, your behavior changes. So for example, I talked about, when I go for my walks every day, and I'm privileged to be able to get up and go for a walk, right? Get some exercise, breathe in some air. I have that option open to me. I try to consider my walking route so that I expose myself to the world as we know it today, like with cameras on storefronts and things like that. I try to, in my route, I try to make sure that I walk past places that will record me walking past those places in case anything were to happen to me or to someone else. And then I can say, hey, this is where I was at this time. I even, I have my cell phone with me because I listen to podcasts and music when I'm walking. I even use an app to track my route and how far I've gone and how long I've gone. And all those wonderful metrics are great for me, but they're also available to show or to demonstrate where I was at a certain time. And it maybe people might think, why would you think that way? Well, it's unfortunate, but like this is the way I think because of things I've experienced in my life. And so I think about this is the way I operate. And some people would call it crazy. I don't think it's crazy. I think it's just making sure that I can account for the life I'm living where I am. And to say that nothing has ever happened to me on my walks. But what if something happened? Right? Like what if something happened? I like to be able to say, well, hey, I walked past this strip mall at this time, or I don't know what time it was. It was between, 8 and 9 a.m. Go to the bank and check the camera feed because the bank is going to have a camera facing the street 100%. They're eyeballing their whole perimeter, right? That's their job to protect that money and whatever's in there. So, long story short, as we were saying in the on ramp, we've made a lot of connections this week. I've made a lot of connections this week. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what's going on in the States, what the bigger picture is, what my role is in it, all that stuff. The guy in Central Park, Mr. Cooper's his name,
Mhm.
who recorded the lady with the dog who was not happy with him because he was recording her because of a skirmish that they had, and she went nuts and started calling the police, and some of the things she said on the 911 call or whoever she was talking to get to the police were, people are talking about how her words were weaponized. People are talking about how, the way she knew exactly what to say in that moment to try to deliver a message of desperation and that she was going to be harmed by this black man, like a lot of these things, I've been hearing people break down. They've been decoding it, kind of like
Mhm.
what you and I like to do. And now we've gotten to a point where we're just talking about it as buddies. And I mean, what do you say? What do you do? Like, God forbid I just take a walk in the neighborhood and I don't know where anybody's cameras are and something happens and somebody's word is against mine. I don't know what happens next. I'd rather not go through something like that. It takes me back, I'll tell you, it takes me back to shortly after 9/11 happened. And you'll have to excuse me, people, if you've heard this story from me before, and Chris, same for you, but I feel it's appropriate because it speaks to the bigger picture. 9/11 happened, and it was like it was the all-out offense against Arab people was on again. Like they're like, okay, well, the Taliban did it or whatever they were saying at the time. It was focused on the Middle East, right? Like these people are doing this to us again. And no biggie on my part, but I remember at work one day shortly after 9/11, and as you know, security shot up and everything was whacked out at the airports and stuff after that. But I was at work and I was an intake and assessment officer at a adult high school. And so my job was to meet with possible students to the school to do an assessment and evaluation and to interview them to figure out what they needed and how I could help them get to what they wanted, where they needed to go. And I was 24 years old, so I was young and dumb. Uh, Maybe I was 23. I was 23 or 24, and it was a lady had come in, an older lady, much older than me at the time, and she was told, okay, fill out these forms and you're going to meet with one of our assessment and intake officers. There was two of us. There was me, the younger ethnic male, and the older British um, white um, head of guidance. Those were your two options. And the lady took the papers from the secretary, looked at me, pointed at me, and said, I'm not meeting with him. And everybody in the room knew what she meant. The people waiting to meet with me, the people who had met with me, my boss, the secretaries, everybody knew what was meant by that. And the first thought I had was, no problem. I've got a lot on my plate. I don't need to meet with you, especially if you're gonna give me lip and attitude. Like, that's cool. Take it somewhere else. But everybody in the room knew what that meant. And I was like, this sucks. This sucks. You know, without knowing me, knowing anything about me. I mean, I'm working in a Catholic school as a guidance person. Like, you got to think about what leads somebody to that, right? It's not like I'm a construction worker, on no offense to construction workers, but I'm not like some dude on the street working with a hard hat on and, like, you know, doing like manual labor. Like, I'm in a school. I had to do something to get to that school. I had to.
You had purpose, intention. You were there with the right training. You're not a random. You are not a random.
I'm not a random. And I guess that's what I want to say. I'm not a random. If you look at the universe, things have to happen to get people in those places. I have no idea who this lady is. So anyway, long story short, I don't know. I don't think she was admitted as a student, because now that I think back, I never saw her again. And I would have, my spidey sense would have tingled every time I was around her, or every time she came into the guidance office for guidance. I would have, you know, said to somebody, do I meet with her? If I meet with her, I'm meeting out here in the common area at the round table so everybody can see. And if you really want to hear what I'm saying, it's available to you. Like, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I would never want to meet with her alone in my office. And even now, as a veteran teacher, if I keep a student in for recess, or when I had my TED Ed meetings, it was mostly female students who wanted to be part of it. I always made sure the door is open. People know there's going to be a bunch of grade 8 girls in my room. We're doing TED Ed. Please come in, say hello, sit in. Like, I make it as transparent as possible what's happening, and that this is what's happening. This is the plan. I want people to come and check things out, make sure everything's legit. But back then, I'd have people come into my office and I'd close the door because they wanted to talk about personal things. And I wasn't really worried. But with this woman, it was one of those things where as soon as she did that, I was like, okay, I can't be alone with this person. I don't even know, can I ever meet with this person? And then being the stupid young person, I was like, how am I going to help this person? Because she's obviously here because she needs to upgrade or something. But she's just basically said she won't meet with me. So what happens when I'm the only counselor in the building and she needs to talk to one? I don't know. But all those things went through my head. So having experienced stuff like that, I'm not interested in getting myself in a situation where I need to prove where I was and what I was doing, that I possibly wasn't the instigator. I'd like to think that I didn't instigate something, but anyway, it's just all this that, we brought up that conversation in our book club meeting, and it's very real. And then it brings me back to my students, right? So like I know I'm kind of ranting now, but it's all kind of connected. Yesterday on Facebook, a teacher I work with is Black. And one of her friends posted on her Facebook site asking about, can you give me some guidance on what, and her friend is white and has white children. And she was saying, can you give me some guidance? Like, what do I tell my kids? How do I talk about this? How do I talk about color with my kids? And I respectfully read all the thread. And then I wanted to throw something in. So I said, hey, is it okay if I chime in here and I give you my perspective on seeing color and not seeing color? And then the lady said, please do. And I kind of went on about how I want you to see my color. I want you to teach your children to see the people in front of them. If the person is Black, then they're Black. If they're brown, then they're brown. If they're white, then they're white. But what you need to teach them is that it doesn't stop there. whatever valuation you're going to give an individual, it doesn't stop with the color of their skin. So what happens next? So you acknowledge, this is a Black person. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think then you learn about the person. What is this person's narrative? What is their story? What do they believe? What do they not believe? What do they like? What do they not like? Because I say this because I said, I get when people say to me, no matter whether they're white or not, they say, I don't see color. I get that I think they're trying to tell me that they're not letting the fact that this person is black interfere with how they communicate and deal with and connect with that person. They're not saying, oh, this person's black, and they let all the stereotypes enter in. I get that. But if you take it too far, you're basically you're continuing the harm that's been done, because at one point, looking at a black person and making all this valuation of this person, that's harmful. But now you're doing the opposite. You're taking away everything about that. I'm in front of 20 kids, most of them are black. If I don't see color, then I don't see their narrative. I won't hear their narrative. Part of their culture and part of their story is that they are black, and that they come from a place where the majority of the people are black and they live a life of a certain way. And so I acknowledge the people in my room. Hey, you're black. That's just one thing, one way to describe you. But there's more to you. And if I don't like you, it's not because you're black. It's because you're mean to me, or you tell me things about other people that I don't want to know, or you treat people negatively, or that's why I'm not going to like you. But I'm not going to put my hand and finger at you and say, you're Arab, and I know what you people did on 9/11, so I'm not talking to you. So teach your kids to see the color, because there's beauty in color. And then if we don't see color, guess what? Everybody's white? I can't live. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. I don't see any color. So what do you see then? All you see is no color, which is white. Oh, that's not cool. So I gave my perspective and why I provided it that way. Let's not disenfranchise colored people anymore by now all of a sudden not seeing their color, because we've disenfranchised them with their color. So now we're going to disenfranchise them by not seeing their color? No. Why don't you just teach your kids to look at the humans there and to acknowledge that they look different than you, just like they're going to acknowledge that you look different than them, and move on. Make your connections and build your friendships, or your no friendships because this person's not a nice person. One more thing I'm going to say about that, I'm going to stop. I brought my youngest to my school this year at Christmas time for our Christmas celebration at our school, the after school evening thing. And my son, it was different for him. He's not used to being surrounded by colored people, but this is what it looked like at my school. So the first time my kids saw my class picture at my new school, they were like, Dad, all your kids are black. And I'm like, okay. And yes, they are black. Where's the rub? And then after talking to them and because they were like, Dad, don't get mad at me. I'm like, I'm not getting mad at you. Let's talk about this. They said we're not used to seeing this. This is foreign to us. This is foreign. I'm like, awesome. Let's talk about this. And that was good. We talked about it. And then I brought him into my school and he said, Dad, like, you're right. It's just like there's a lot of colored people here. I said, this is the school community I work at. These are the people that come to school and learn just like you do. And the really cool thing that's come from this understanding and this exposure and this education is now some of the students from my school are moving to his school with the boundary change. And my son has already said he can't wait to run into some of the kids that I've taught over the years. He's looking forward to welcoming them to his school because it's his school and he's welcoming them in. To him, it's not going to be weird. But initially it was a shock for him. And my wife says it all the time. They're like, guys, your dad is ethnic. Some of the things they say is tone deaf. They're like, your dad is ethnic. What are you talking about? They're like, but we don't see it. We don't live it. And I'm like, well, maybe that's partly on me. I don't know. But come to come to my school, see how I operate. You know, it was such an eye opener for my son. Kids coming up to him saying, "Hey, you're Mr. C's son?" He's like, "Yeah." And then they're like, "Do you play basketball?" He's like, "No, I play hockey." And then they have this, like, they start to talk, right? And it was a thing of beauty when it was happening. So needless to say, all this has kind of come to the top. You know, people are talking about equity because it's cool these days. It's cool to talk about equity. I've been begging and praying for equity since I was a kid in grade school. I just didn't know what to call it then, but I know what to call it now. I'm done my rant, Chris, if you want to jump
good.
in.
No, that's all good. So I'll drop into just this past week. I saw a really powerful spoken word piece by Tyler Merritt. I think the title is "I'm a Black Man," and it's a video of him running through his day, and he connects dots to everyday life in a very kind of plain tone, very calm tone, kind of walking through a day in the life of Tyler Merritt. And it's you know, I'm not going to sort of go through I don't want to explain the whole video. I encourage, well, if anyone listens to whoever's listening to the podcast, go check that one out. But it really does. I've spent this past week trying to figure out not what to talk about, because there was a whole lot of what. Your statement around wanting to talk about equity, for me, where I take that in is the how and the why for myself. So how do I talk about it? And it's easy to say, just start talking about it. Make the mistake, start talking about it. Make some more mistakes, keep talking about it. There was a gentleman talking with Anderson Cooper on CNN last night, and his resume escapes me, but he was speaking as a person of color from inside the community, and kind of laying out the importance of kind of what, in the same shape of what you were saying about, we have to see color, we have to be able to name color, we have to use that as a gateway to the getting to know of other people. So you have your beard, but what else? What else about you? You know, you have a podcast. What else about you? You know, you've claimed your ethnic status, but what else about you? And this is where sometimes that conversation where someone says, "I don't see color," that's the whole other richness that just gets stripped of the conversation. That the gateway that is so easy to walk through, which would be how a person looks, does not lead to a deeper conversation of who they are. And this, he might have been a professor. One of the things he said in sort of working through this is, and we've heard this in different sort of frames, sometimes more connected with the design process and actual lessons in school, is that you make a mistake, you fail, but then you get better at failing. So you're getting progressively better failures. Now, I think from memory, he was talking about the efforts from within the community, as in be prepared to do that. I took it as a call to action, as in from not being from inside the community, that's what I should be doing too. Making the mistakes, make better mistakes, make better mistakes. Now, not the better mistakes that start and stop with what color are you, but the better mistakes that happen as I get to know you as an outsider from your community. The mistakes that I make by trying to figure out what's an invitation that I should be looking for from you into the community. And then what are the mistakes I'll make as a participant once I'm invited into a community, to sort of like, because I still don't have all the puzzle pieces. I may become connected, but I still don't have a grounding in my voice yet. So the continuous iteration of making these mistakes, but towards that, getting to know you better before, and the responsibility to do your own work of research. You know, if you know someone, if someone says to you, you say to them, "Oh, what is it that you're having for lunch?" And they say, "Oh, I'm having X." Well, do the work to sort of, you could ask the person if you have a relationship, "Well, tell me about that dish." Or you can just go on your device and check it out. Find out more about that dish. You might think that, oh my gosh, it doesn't look necessarily appealing to me, but then you do the research and then you find out, oh, I really do like those few components. I wonder if I could try it. So this is the kind of the duality of it, is like whatever you're presented with, there's also the obligation, if you are the person from the outside, but still the privileged and power holder, to do your work, to sort of do your own thinking, right? And the burden of doing that. Tyler Merritt's piece, his spoken word piece, apart from it being just a really fantastic piece, also ends with a call to action, but a countering call to action, as in, kind of stop doing this thing, viewer, stop doing this thing, and life could be better. I mean, throughout it, it's also, I am a black man. This is him introducing himself to the world, and in some ways introducing himself, and as I heard it, introducing the sort of like the a person who identifies as black. So a general introduction to, hey, would you like to meet a black man? I'm willing to introduce myself here if you think you don't know one yet. It's a very humble piece, but a powerful piece. And I encourage people to listen to it end to end, watch it end to end, and kind of do their reflection on it. When you were talking about walking, we talked about the walking and the cameras, and how, you know, some people are comfortable with being recorded, and you so brilliantly kind of laid down your purpose in being recorded and noticed in spaces. It occurred to me that you know, at some point the idea of us being surveilled was rather like it was to protect something. We don't always know what. I mean, if there's cameras up in a mall, I'm imagining it's there to protect the business owners. It's there to protect the product that, you know, the business owners have, probably the property as well. The thinking that I started to go through as well, and it had to do with I got to see his first name, and if you find it while I'm blathering, what was the dude's first name? Cooper from New York City. Yeah, I
don't know.
I'm not even going to mention her name, but his first name, I need to kind of, you know what, I'm going to pause for a moment, and I need to put his name right up.
While you do that, I just want to say, after you sent me the video called Before You Call the Cops, the Tyler Merritt project.
Mm-hmm.
Where I actually went a little bit deeper, and I found another video from him. It actually just came up the other day. It's so cool, but it's so chilling. So he starts off, he's like, I'm going for a walk, and he puts his hoodie, and he's got his headphones on. He's listening to music. And then as he's walking, he's talking about like, oh man, love this Kanye West song. It's so good. And he sings along a little bit. And then he's like, I wonder if people know that I'm listening to Taylor Swift right now. And there are people walking past me singing the Taylor Swift song. And then at the end, he stops, he takes off his hood, and he says, yes, sir, my name is Ty. And then it cuts off. And then it hits you. And he's like, this is what's been happening to some of these black people. They're out now. They're walking. They got their hood on. They're listening. Do you know I'm listening to Taylor Swift? And I'm singing to Taylor Swift. And I'm thinking this and I'm thinking that. And then the cop comes up to me and he's like, get your hood off. And what's your name? And before he can even finish his name, he's done. And I was like, oh my God. The Tyler Merritt project, the way he's able, it's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He basically is like, hey, I'm going to give you a minute to get to know me, and then I'm going to show you what happens at the end. Yeah. Everybody only sees the end. The black person who was gunned down because he ran from the police or whatever the situation is. Why don't you hear my story first?
Mm-hmm. Find
out what I like, the kind of cereal I ate this morning for breakfast, the joking I do with my buddies here at work. Like, it is genius. It is genius.
The gentleman's name is Christian Cooper. So I want to, again, the name is important. This event happened to him. The event also is connected with a wider chain of events that we've definitely observed this past week. So the moment when Mr. Cooper pulled out his phone and started to record the interaction stuck in my head, got connected with your conversation. It stuck to, like, it just got drawn right to it. Like it was magnetism, got drawn right to your story about walking in public places. And then maybe think about, surveillance and the necessity to self-surveil, and the idea of a city surveilling you and not really knowing why they would or what they're doing with the information. It has always been a bit of a kind of a boogeyman in our digital spaces. The idea that websites can track you and cookies and grab information, and is my webcam right now on and recording me? Has someone hacked it? Like there's always this kind of boogeyman factor about someone else capturing our data and not really knowing what it's being used for. As soon as you mentioned the moving through spaces where you wanted to be recorded, the chill that happened with me is the shift into people of color automatically self-surveilling, not just with the intent of, I mentioned in our book talk, I talked about, that idea of found footage, and often the found footage, more of a movie trope than anything, is that it's that piece of information that kind of gets the story going. Oh, we found these photographs. Would have been photographs back in the day, would have been some sort of artifact. Then we kind of moved into video footage, and sometimes it reveals a truth that we wouldn't have access to without having this perceived real-time media. And my chill from these events as connected with using media was but I'm observing these moments now and seeing how people of color go into situations where them filming the moment is not the same as the cameras filming and protecting property. The individuals are gathering almost their own found footage in the case, like, one, to demonstrate that they've done nothing wrong. Two, so in doing nothing wrong, they're maintaining their integrity as a whole person, that they are a good person. They acted according to the rules, which could be saying, I think the first thing, doing nothing wrong, I'm talking about the law. The second layer is that they're a good person, that they followed the rules. They followed the rules as laid out by society. And then the final piece, which is kind of like the final piece, is that thing that, grocery stores do, is to prove that a crime was committed. It's the gathering of the information that a crime was actually committed. And in this case, in Mr. Cooper's situation, Christian Cooper's situation, it was the evidence showing that this woman was breaking local bylaws, like at the heart of it. And then along the way, it captured her escalation, her dog whistling, using triggering words, knowing full well that it had the power to activate a system. And it became chilling in that moment as I was watching it. And I don't know how this hasn't occurred to me. I've seen other footage like this, but in that moment, even though the footage seemed to be capturing something that was in favor of Christian Cooper, I still wasn't 100% sure that no harm would come to him. And on one level, when she stopped engaging directly with him, as in telling him to, don't film me, and she was able to compose herself in front of the camera like it was her Academy Award moment and pull out a script that as I'm listening to it, my fear starts rising because it's the perfect script that has been used over and over and over again to other someone. And I could only imagine on the other end what that script sounded like. And I wanted to I wanted to hope that there was somebody on that end that had both the professional and ethical grounding to kind of parse it out into what was actually happening. But I think history has proven that there was no guarantee in that moment that that would have just turned out to be another piece of found footage where some harm came to Mr. Cooper. And that rocked me. That absolutely rocked me, that thought process, which for some might be not new at all, but it is part of the week and will carry with me moving forward. And I'm not entirely sure what next step to take based on this wisdom that I have now, because that's my responsibility. That's my responsibility now. Now that I've had this, cool, Clough, you've had an aha moment. Who gives a crap? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? That's what I leave this week with.
What I'm going to say, I don't want to be surveilled. Like, I'm not a fan of like people watching me or knowing where I am at all times. I'm not a fan of it, but here's my position. If I'm going to be out for a walk, be it at night or, you see, there's two extremes for me, right? Because of my life. I'm either up early in the morning walking or I'm out late at night walking.
Yeah.
And so I'm out at weird times. Other people aren't with me. I'm alone. There may be other people walking their dogs. They're alone. Like, you don't know, right? So I don't want to be surveilled. But if the cameras are there, I think strategically about how they can be used to my advantage. And like this morning when I went out for my walk, I didn't want to take the regular route, so I mixed it up a bit. So I took a risk, you know. I took some roads. I stayed in the neighborhood. I don't know who has a doorbell camera or whatever, but my app was on, and so I have proof of where I went, the route I took, and how long it took me, and all this and all that. I have that if I need it. But I still made sure to hit some corners, you know, Timmy's at a major intersection, cameras everywhere there, retirement home, cameras everywhere there. Like, this is now, it's kind of a fun thing now. It's kind of a fun thing. I'm going to deviate. I'm going to walk this way. Hey, there's a beer store there. You know they're going to have cameras at the beer store. So it's like,
do you present yourself to the cameras? Do you make sure that you at least at one point go perpendicular to the camera? So they, like, what I'm basically saying, do you adjust your walk such that you know the camera has seen you?
Yes and no. No, like I don't walk up to each dome and do one of these or anything. But that's what they are. They're domes. So I don't know which way the camera's pointing, but I'm assuming that it's pointing in a direction where if somebody were to try to get through this window or through this door, they're going to be exposed. So I am aware. I believe that where I'm walking, I will be seen in a video if they were to look for me. I do believe that. So yeah, I don't. And sometimes what I have a project idea where I want to take a picture of every single camera I see on my walk, but I'm worried because, and I'm saying it here now, I'm worried that if for some reason, I don't know how or why, somebody notices that there's this dude that walks past here every day at this time. Now he's taking pictures of our location. He's taking pictures of the camera.
You're casing the joint.
And and then somebody puts that together and they realize that It's not just that one bank I'm taking pictures of. It's the movie theater and the Lowe's and the Montana's restaurant and the Timmy's and the old age home. Then they're like, who is this guy? What's funny about it, though, is like, I'm like, who is this guy? Listen to podcast 33, season 3. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm not casing any joints, right? I'm not.
Dude, you just created your own found footage. That's what you did. You just laid out your own found footage in case this goes sideways.
So you heard it here first, but like, that's what I would love to do that. Just as a creative, artistic, this is my story. This is what I'm doing. It's why I'm doing it. Look at all the cameras I see on my walk. Because if I can see it, they can see me. So now what I'm wondering, I wonder where are the cameras I can't see? Because they're there. They're there. And I've had this conversation with both of my children because I was a bit of a rowdy teenager. I had my moments, but there weren't a million cameras back then. So I tell my kids all the time now, I'm like, listen, you want to be a doofus? You want to make a poor choice? This is the age you're living in now, is everybody's watching all the time. So if you want to be a dummy and you want to do something negative out on the street or whatever, chances are that's going to be recorded. And chances are you're going to be caught fairly quickly at whatever dumb mistake you do. So, you know, let's think first about some of these things and whether they're worth doing, because I know everybody makes poor choices. I'm guilty of them 100%. But I tell you something, some of the poor choices I made as a teenager, I won't make now, because I know 100% cops will be at my door within a couple of hours and like, hey, buddy, we know what you did on this street corner or whatever, because
we listen to your podcast.
The best thing is nobody listens to this podcast, but here it is being recorded so that if something, I'm just saying, imagine that. Imagine you get a call from me. I'm like, Clough, guess what? Cops were just at my house. They wanted to talk to me about why I took a picture of the camera at Scotia Bank, which then they reviewed the footage. And every day at 7:30 a.m., I'm walking past the bank, same route every day. And my response would be, come on, guys. I might look that stupid, but I'm not. If I'm going to rob the place, you think I'm going to walk past it every day at the same time? Like, just stuff like that starts to come into play. This beard might not be here next episode.
I saw you posted that somewhere.
I posted on Twitter that I think it's time for the beard to go for now.
It might be good then just to go full frontal face in every single camera one morning. And then shave it off and kind of do the same thing. So it's like, right, you get your anonymity back. I will say there is something to that. So I have a tablet that does face recognition, and after I trimmed off my beard, it wouldn't recognize my face anymore. So those of you that can't see me right now, I didn't get to quite chid status, but about 2 weeks ago, I could grab a handful of beard. I no longer have that. It's down to about 3/4 of an inch. So the tablet, I have to reset now. Whatever algorithm in the tablet, it does not see me anymore. I've become invisible to my tablet.
It's wild. Like my driver's license, my passport, my health card, my staff identification badge, everything has this beard on it. And I've just, last night when my family and I went out to pick up our dinner, I said to the family, listen, we need to have a quick family meeting. And they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, the beard's coming off. And I love
that you did it as like family meeting style, not a vote. This is a being presented to, not an actual conversation.
I'm telling you now, so that if I go into the bathroom and I come out with no facial hair, it's not a surprise. I'm thinking about doing something a little bit creative with it. So I'm just letting you all know that I'm feeling this now. In an hour, I might not feel it anymore. I don't know, but I feel like it's time for a change. You know, it's
already in your head though. There's a funny thing. This is the first, like, I've never heard you actually say that. You've never actually said you've made kind of like passing references to how it's connected with your identity. You've even did, you have your limited series podcast, the Barbara Grande, right? You might have to switch that. Barba not so grande, piccolo barba. I don't know what you're going to little beard afterwards, but it's when it gets in your head. Here's the way I kind of look at it. The fact that it gets in your head is worth honoring, because if the thought never entered, right? If there was nothing that allowed it to cross the threshold in, because other people, I'm sure, have mentioned stuff like that in passing, or you've seen an old picture of yourself in passing before that it was, back in the days, I think some of the early pictures I saw is that you're kind of rocking something my length, not the big one, right? But when the idea gets in your head, for me, there's no effective way to get that idea out other than to action it. Like, I need to come out on the other side of that idea. Otherwise it stays in there. Once in a while it fades, but it never escapes. Not me, it never escapes. I have to action it somehow, or it has to be, I either have to action it to feel it through to see if, what's the actual sensation of making that decision feel like, or it has to be pulled away from me like some sort of reality check. Does that make sense? Where it's just, you say to yourself, yeah, we need to get a new car. I want to get a new car. We should have a new car. And you get that whole sort of like affective connection to it. Having it taken away from me would be sitting down and doing the numbers and realizing we get a new car right now. We're not getting groceries for 3 months. Like, okay, it's taken away. And in that case, that auto fades it. Like, it totally takes it away from me. So, yeah. So I think something will happen.
So there it is, kids. That season 3, episode 33. It was kind of a strange one. Clough, I loved how quick you hit the mute button. So Chris is in one of the rooms in his house, and one of the kids came into the room, and you must have heard the footstep because you hit that mute button so fast. I was just shutting this thing down. I think we're good. Especially my son is texting me. He's like, I'm starving, but he's probably had like 4 breakfasts.
That's funny. Almost a very similar conversation just took place. It was just my son checking in very politely, wanting to know whether or not I fed the cat this morning. So very similar. It's about the food that pulls us away, right? Like, that's the thing. Hey, Dad, like, did you feed the cat? Hey, Dad, can you come and feed me? So I'm sure my kids, and the thing is, I know our cat had a full bowl of kibble this morning. So if he's complaining, the cat's a pig. My cat's a pig. I can feed him because we give him like the wet stuff and the kibble. We'll feed him the wet stuff, and then right away he's like, "Is there any more?" Like, is that
I feel as though we failed, Chris. This episode turned out to not be a curbside pickup.
You kept it under an hour.
Yeah, but for us, no, man. The curbside pickup is like 20 to 35 minutes in my mind. Okay. So this was 2 pickups. We pulled in. They threw the food in the trunk. We got home. We're like, wrong food, and went back. That's what we did here today.
Oh, we went out for dessert after. It's pickup plus dessert.
I love you being positive and me being negative. That's just, it goes with the territory. Yeah. So that's it, man. Season 3, episode 33. Next week will be in June. Whoa, cool picture. It reminds me of Van Gogh. So Chris is showing us the picture that he drew, the sketch. It's a tree, and there's a perimeter. The picture's in the perimeter, but then the roots of the tree extend outside of the perimeter of the picture. Very interesting. It can be interpreted in many different ways.
Hey, appreciate the hat tip to Van Gogh.
Yeah, Van Gogh. Which reminded me, I was going to tell you something about reading this fiction book. But anyway.
So can I? Yeah, sorry, you got it. I'm going to show you something.
I don't have the book with me. No.
So I'm checking this one out right now.
What's it called? Peaceful Warrior by who? Dan.
Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
Okay, is it fiction?
It runs the line. I think it's being left to the reader to decide. I know. Sorry. So Dan Millman, it's about his life. It is about his life, but some stuff happened in his life that I think he's kind of fictionalized here in order to get the message through. So it's not a not a very recent one, but I think it's a known book. Was it from what says first printing 2006, but 1980. So when this was first written. Despite his success, college student and world champion athlete Dan Millman is haunted by a feeling that something is missing from his life. So it is based on his life. But there is some stuff about it that kind of, the way he's remembering it and writing about it, it kind of gets a little fictional, spiritual, I guess. So it's interesting. It's a cool read so far.
Cool. Well, you'll have to fill me in because I think at this point, after having read an entire novel, fiction, what kind of fiction is it? It's historical fiction. Historical fiction. Whitehead, great book, The Nickel Boys. But I think now I need a shot of nonfiction. I need a shot of. I need to read a story that really happened. That's about someone. Those are my favorite. It was funny when I was telling my wife. She's like, well, what do you like? Nonfiction's boring. I'm like, no, honey. I don't want to read like a book about bumblebees. I want to read like a story about survival or pushing through or something. That's where I want to go.
I got one. You want one more suggestion?
Sure.
If you're at all interested. Okay, let me grab it.
Chris is going through his many books. I wonder what he's got for me.
If you want, I can mail this to you.
Oh, From the Ashes. I've heard about this. Did you not just do a book club with school people about this?
We're in the last. So your book club inspired me to play with one with my colleagues, and we have 7 people in total that are doing it. So this week. This upcoming week is our last chunk of it, and then next week, Jesse Thistle, the author, is going to come to our meeting.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, but if you want one about like rebuilding yourself after, it gets very broken. So it's my story of being Métis, homeless, and finding my way from the ashes. It's like I said, if you don't find something, I got no problem, dude. I'll drop this in the mail and you can check it out.
Okay, thanks.
Send it back when you're done or whatever, but it'll save if you're not sure.
I just wanted to say I'd love to give it back to you when we sit down to have a meal together, but that won't be until 2024, and you probably want your book back before then. So
we'll figure it. I would say it's worth it. I would say just even in the it's worth having your own copy. Absolutely worth having your own copy. It is one of those ones that in the Nickel Boys, I told you at one point it has teeth. Just kind of saying that book has teeth. This has teeth, and it just keeps on chomping. It just keeps on biting to the point where you think, like, how can there be anything left?
Right. Okay. So, good to know.
Yeah. Great book.
Thanks for another good episode.
You too, bud. You too.
We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
See ya.